While the topic is a little bit grim, it is also very interesting. Today we are talking about the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu and its corresponding anniversary with World War I. It is thought by medical historians and medical researchers these days to be the mother of all flus, with its offspring infecting the world every year. Since then, we can thank God that it's not the version that was in 1918 and 1919. The Spanish flu has been looked at quite a bit lately because of the 100-year anniversary of it, and popular shows like the Ministry of Time in Spain have mentioned it, and mentioned that it was called the Spanish flu because the Spaniards were the only ones who weren't trying to cover it up. And interestingly, some of the articles that we read during the course of this research backed that up as well, which I was going to look into that. It's like interesting. The New York Times even mentioned that while it was obvious that there was a problem, the Ministry of Health, or the Health Department, not Ministry of Health, I'm sorry, in Britain, the Health Department was saying that there was no problem, that there wasn't an outbreak in New York City, which there was. Philadelphia stopped sales of liquor, and all over the country they closed things like ball games and theaters and other stuff like that. The one other interesting thing from the New York Times article was that they weren't really sure about the closing of schools, if that had been necessary. I personally think that was probably very necessary. The New York Times as well, they were fussing at the government, at the War Department especially, for taking all of the qualified doctors and nurses and using them for the military in the United States and over in France and other places. There was a terrible shortage of doctors and nurses to where most people were having to take care of sick family members themselves. Of the people in the United States, the ones who were hit the worst were the Native Americans, the rural populations, and pregnant women, which is very, very sad. They all had an extremely high death rate. The article, let's see here. Yeah. One thing that was noticed by researchers was that there was a higher incidence in the rural areas and with indigenous populations than there were in the cities. One theory for this was that the cities were underreporting it. The other theory for this was that the city populations had been exposed to the Russian flu back in the late 1800s, and so the people had more antibodies available. The people who had nursed their children would have had the antibodies. The people who had it but recovered, they would have had the antibodies as well, and so that helped them fight the swine flu. I mean, not the swine flu. Gosh, the Spanish flu as well. Here in the rural area, I looked into our historical society and what they had to say about it. The different books on the area, the areas in town, the parts of the county where the posh people lived, in their in the towns where they weren't keeping livestock really in town. They were, it was different. The mining communities, you would think that they would be more hard hit, but actually they weren't. It was different from how it was in most of the rural areas. The mining companies employed their own doctors who worked with the local herb women. One of the things that they did was spread lime all over the yards and all over every grassy area, everywhere where animals went. The theory of the doctor was that it was perhaps made worse by the animals, or the animals were contributing to it somehow, which later research found out that it was the most avian strain of the flu we have. Well, he had The doctors had the lime put in front of everybody's doors. You were to wipe off your feet in the lime before coming in and take off your shoes before you come in the house. And then also, if you were around any people, you were supposed to wash yourself and your clothes thoroughly. They didn't have as much of a problem. Also, when dealing with the sick and with the dead, the doctors and the herb women had everybody wear bandanas that were saturated in the newly invented Vicks Vapor Rub, which interestingly back at the time had slightly different ingredients than it does now. But the people caring for the sick weren't getting sick because of these precautions. It was very, very interesting. The ingredients that were in the Vicks back then were menthol, like they are today. This one, menthol, camphor, eucalyptus, thyme oil, juniper tar, nutmeg, oil of, hold on, let me see this thing here. It was, oil of turpentine. Okay, and then that was in the petrolatum base. I have this, I'm not sure if it will show up on, it's an old advertisement that has the ingredients listed. It's about the only place you can find the ingredients list from back then. But it was discovered in North Carolina, which is just a few miles from here. And they apparently were able to work out a deal with the inventor of it to get a whole bunch of it. And it really helped. They took similar precautions during the polio outbreak many years later and had a much smaller incidence of polio as well. Anyways, the New Zealanders, they had an interesting solution for their patients to try, which was taking the ingredients of that slime that the kids play with these days, the goopy slime. Take out the glue, and you have all the ingredients that New Zealand was recommending for patients of the Spanish flu to use to snort, gargle, and brush their teeth with 3 times a day. And that is the baking soda, borax, salt, and hot water. So anyways, the video's gone kind of long. I do apologize for that. But I hope that you guys all have a healthy holiday season. And this definitely merits more study, more looking into to see what some of these things, what the success rate perhaps on some of these other treatments that the people were using. Anyways, God bless you all. Have a good one.